Hello and welcome to another episode of the Bitcoin News Show, guys. I'm Vortex, and you guys are right here on the World Crypto Network. So glad to see you guys again. We're back again. We got a few announcements to talk about first, and then we'll introduce our guests. So, just a couple of announcements for you guys. This show is now weekly. That's right. I am doing this show every single Sunday now at noon Pacific time, right here on the World Crypto Network. So we hope you guys join us. It should be a blast. We have tons of people in the chat already, over almost 100 live viewers. So let's get it started. So the second announcement is Richard Hart interviewed Roger Ver. So I don't know if you guys got a chance to see that, but it was a pretty good interview. And on the World Crypto Network, we covered that. So we actually went through the video and gave our opinions point by point. Really can't recommend that enough. That is in the show notes, the link to that. And then one more final announcement real quick. Since everybody kind of covered it already, we're not going to use it as a topic, but I did just want to say that Segwit has been activated, so I'm super happy to see that. I think everybody here is super happy to see that, so we're really excited about that. There's starting to be more and more Segwit transactions on the network, and I have links in the show notes where you can actually see all the transactions that are Segwit specific. So definitely check that out, guys, if you get a chance. So we're already at almost 400 live viewers, so let's get the show started. Joining us today, we have Mr. Safetyin. You guys need to follow him on Twitter. He's got so much stuff to say about Bitcoin. He's writing a book about Bitcoin being sound money. So Safetyin, thanks for joining us. How you doing?
Very good. Thank you very much for having me. This is a pleasure.
Thanks so much for being on, man. I really love your Twitter account. I really love the stuff you got to say, and I'm really glad to have you on again. I don't remember if I've ever had you on, Safetyin, but we got to have you on more often, that's for sure. So thanks again, man, for joining us. And our special guest today, ladies and gentlemen, we have Mr. Andy Hoffman, one of the oldest, one of the best gold bugs out there, and now he's getting into cryptocurrencies. He's been saying all sorts of great things about cryptocurrencies. I have a link to him interviewing Mr. Renegade Investor, who was also a special guest on the show that comes on once in a while. And so I have that linked into the show notes. You guys need to check that out. And Andy, thanks so much for joining us, man. How are you doing?
I couldn't be happier or more honored to be on this show. Particularly in the first post-Segwit show, because honestly, in 2 years' time, I've learned everything that I know about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency from essentially 4 sources. I wanted to make sure I got them all down. One is the World Crypto Network, one is the Bitcoin Meister, one is the dozens of brilliant, insightful people on Twitter, and of course, Andreas Antonopoulos. I just couldn't be happier to be here. And it's funny, you called me a gold bug, and I would disagree with that. I am simply someone who believes in sound money, whatever it may be. And I believe gold has monetary value and Bitcoin has a completely different monetary value, but both of them are superior to fiat currency. And I think the world is going to be dramatically changing. I think if everyone thought 2017 was a major change in the status quo, wait till they see what happens in the next 2 years.
Absolutely awesome. Couldn't agree with you more, Andy. So again, just want to say thanks for joining us. I really wanted to have you on earlier, but I'm just trying to go through all the guests, and we only did the show every other week. So I'm so glad to finally have you on the show, so we can finally start talking about gold and Bitcoin and how they relate and things like that, because there's just not a whole lot of episodes where we got to do that before. So again, thanks so much for joining us. So let's get right into the first topic. The first topic, we switched up the topics a little bit because of the requests from the panelists. So the first topic now is really going to be about Bitcoin and it being digital gold. I want to hear from the panelists what you guys think about this, and is this really true? And maybe even comment on Ben Bernanke publicly announcing to speak at a Ripple conference. And so maybe we can hear some thoughts from you guys on that too. So first we'll go with First we'll go with Andy, the special guest, and then we'll go with Safetyin after that. So Andy, there's been a lot of talk about Bitcoin being digital gold, and I believe even Safetyin is writing a book about it being digital gold. So maybe you can tell us what your thoughts on how can this be, and is this really the truth?
Well, the funny thing is that, whatever sector people get focused on, they tend to be, you have Bitcoin maximalists, or in this case, crypto maximalists, and then if you have gold maximalists like Peter Schiff. And, what I found, and I've been in the precious metal, in fact, I just left the precious metal business last week after more than a dozen years, closer to 15 years. And what I found in all of my time there, certainly in the last few years, is that the I've heard the biggest anti-gold comments that I've made, and probably the most ignorant anti-gold comments, have come from the Bitcoin community. And conversely, the biggest anti-Bitcoin and most clueless, to use a mean word, but uninformed, have come from the gold community. And it's gotten to the point where I've spent the last 2 years trying to explain to people that there is a bridge between both. Both have monetary value. I call them both scarcity assets, because we are in a world where so many assets are tied to the legacy fiat currency system that is dying and is propped up by governments. There are so few places to protect your wealth. And gold has always been one of them. Of course, it's been held down by the government for so long. The government does not realize that the true enemy in going forward from a monetary standpoint is Bitcoin. And that's why you get these comical announcements like Ben Bernanke, who himself is, is a dinosaur, going to a conference run by, of all companies, Ripple. I don't know if it's a company or what you want to call it. But the point is that fiat currency is dying, and it's going to be replaced by cryptocurrency, or as I call it, the ultimate monetary death cross. And when that happens, I think you're going to see not billions, trillions of dollars and euros and yen and francs leaving the fiat currency system to go into the massively undervalued and massively undersupplied crypto market. And that's why a lot of altcoins can move up even if they don't have a game plan, because people simply are escaping the system. And of course, then you have the top tier ones which get the majority of money right now. And then of course, there's King Bitcoin. And to answer the question, is Bitcoin digital gold? And everyone wants to know what this gold guy thinks. And my question is absolutely 100%, with one caveat. And that caveat is that it proves its immutability. And if you asked me this 3, 4, 5 months ago, I would say, well, there's still questions. I have a big position in Bitcoin and I'm really hoping it works out. But there was a lot of uncertainty going into all these forks, and you had Bitcoin Unlimited, and now this Bcash, which came out of nowhere, and of course the 2x, which is coming up, but I think has been severely neutered by what has happened. But the point was there was a lot of uncertainty, so you really had to take it on faith that Bitcoin would get through this, and no one knew how it would happen, but apparently it has. I mean, Bcash is proven to be a scam, and I basically. The only reason that it's still around, that it even occurred, was because of stubborn egotists, misguided ideologues, and of course, most importantly, greedy miners that just want to take the money from themselves, because this is a scam of epic proportions. And probably the primary reason that 2x is going to go forward is because they think they can repeat it and steal money from the Bitcoin community. But eventually, these scams are not going to work anymore. And in this case, if they don't put in replay protection, I don't even know if most people are even going to participate in it. So yes, I believe Bitcoin in the last few months has dramatically increased the global belief that it is digital gold, which is why it's gone from 1,000 to 4,000. And and once we get through this episode, I truly believe that once this S2X gets through, whether it happens or it happens and becomes the next Bcash, I think we're going to be well on the way to 5-digit Bitcoin. And that's when you're going to really see the mainstream start to flood out of these overvalued government prop stocks and bonds and into the cryptocurrency space, a lot of it into Bitcoin, a lot of it in, blindly into just about everything else in the space, from Bcash down to the lowest level of the altcoins. And then there's going to be gold just sitting there, finally able to not be focused on by governments as a monetary nemesis. They will stop being able to hold it down, and gold will just go up to 10,000 or whatever number it'll be, and no one will even pay attention to it, because the whole world in 2018 is going to be focusing on Bitcoin and cryptocurrency.
Absolutely. So, so many good points in there, Andy. Let me ask you a quick follow-up question. So, with Monero rising, right, hitting new all-time highs, and Litecoin hitting new all-time highs today, what is your thoughts on these altcoins taking Bitcoin's market share, right? Is this actually how you see it? Is this what's happening, or is this just people exiting the fiat system and being allowed to speculate on more than just one coin?
It's the latter. And it's funny, because I think we all know there was a brief period a few months ago when the FUD about the upcoming forks was at its highest, and Bitcoin was getting hit, and Ethereum was rocketing higher at the same time. And the meme was that Ethereum was going to pass Bitcoin because Bitcoin's problems. And the funny thing is Ethereum has all of these same problems and many more. But at the moment, at the time, that's what it was. And, you know, people in Bitcoin were getting mad, actually, like, how could Ethereum be going up while Bitcoin's be going down? But now that we've passed that, and it really doesn't matter. Look, Ethereum's going to be number 2 for some time. I mean, I guess something could happen, but probably it's going to stay around and not go anywhere. But it's gotten the point right now where, look, the only other one I own is Litecoin, and I own it in a big way because I believe it's the silver to Bitcoin's gold. I think Charlie Lee is amazing, and I think it's got the same characteristics. But aside from that, all the other ones, they don't have limited supply, so they are basically tech stocks in a sector that the world is going to be moving into en masse. So some of them will be giant winners. Some of them will be big losers, but I think you're going to have smooth sailing for the sector in general for a very long time. I really don't have much interest in the sector in general, except for the monetary aspect, which I think is the primary use case. And that's why I am almost all Bitcoin and a little bit Litecoin. But as far as, you know, are they taking market dominance? Absolutely. I am rooting all these guys on. I am thrilled to see Dash and Monero and Ethereum Classic and a whole bunch of other ones surging, because all it means is that people are racing out of the fiat monetary system and into crypto. And just you wait, because there's going to be a crisis. The powers that be will not be able to hold this together for much longer. Maybe it's a crisis of just because the system is so overvalued and the economy is so bad and the debt and the currencies are being hyperinflated. Or maybe it's simply because people just start to lose confidence in paper and start to gain confidence in Bitcoin. It's happening very soon.
Absolutely good points. I do have one more final follow-up question for you, Andy, before we go to safety, and just want to introduce Ken Bozak real quick to the show, ladies and gentlemen. Ken, how you doing?
Hey, how goes it, man? Thanks for thinking of me. I just took my lunch break at work to hop in the conversation a little late, but I'm here.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Yeah, so, you know, Ken's a trader, so he's going to give us a bit of a trading perspective in a little bit here. So first, Andy, let me just ask you real quick, just as a follow-up question. Can maybe you explain to the audience why market cap doesn't really matter too much when you look at all these coins and you see that these brand new coins are coming up to the top 10 all the time, and, you know, and people seeing these market caps thinking, oh, this has got to be valuable. Maybe you can speak to a little bit about that, about what you feel about the market cap of a lot of these altcoins.
Well, the first thing is that think of all the money that's been printed in recent years. And believe me, a lot of the money that's been printed you're not told about. But when you learn that the Swiss bank is now the biggest buyer of US tech stocks, and that the Japanese bank owns more than 3/4 of all the ETFs on the equity market in Japan, you realize just how much money has been printed and thrown into all these other markets, creating what I call dot-com valuations in a Great Depression era. So a lot of this money is just flowing out, going from areas of taking profit into undervalued areas. And it's so funny because for people to call these things a bubble, I mean, yes, there are ICOs that are completely worthless, that have values because people are just throwing money into them. But the sector in general, you know, $150 billion market cap for an entire sector that's going to, you know, change the world? Absolutely not. I look at one like Litecoin and I think, you know, at a $2 billion market cap, that's the equivalent of a penny stock a few years ago. And this is, to me, the second most valuable cryptocurrency there is. And in the case of Bitcoin, $70 billion for something that is changing the world. I mean, what's going to have a bigger impact on the world, Apple or Bitcoin? I would say that Bitcoin by a long shot, and Bitcoin is going to be a lot longer lasting and dominant. So just to get to Apple's market valuation, we have to go up 10x, and it will happen. So I do not think there's a bubble at all. And I do think that there's going to be a lot of boats that are going to be lifted by the tide. There, of course, are going to be, there's going to be, you know, corrections. Maybe as Tone says, maybe the Segwit 2X will cause a major correction, or maybe it'll just be one like we had a couple months back. But in the big picture, I think the amount of money, and this is kind of like what me and Edward Renegade Investor were talking about, people can't even comprehend the amount of money, and I say money with quotes around it, the dollars, yen, euro, yuan, you name it, that's going to be entering this tiny little sector. I mean, we are talking trillions and trillions of dollars, and yen and all these are going to be entering the crypto space. I said it last year that I believe this will be the biggest bull market of all time. And frankly, I lived through the dot-com era. I already think this is, you know, we're already starting to get to that level, and we haven't even just got started.
Absolutely. Lots of good points in there. Thanks for your comments on that, Andy. It really is just amazing to see that, these these coins like Litecoin being really, in my opinion, one of the, like you said, one of the second most valuable coins, have a $2 billion little market cap. I mean, it's about time that we start seeing some all-time highs in that area. And so, yeah, or 3 billion market cap. So yeah, Ken's on top of all the market caps there. So let's go to Safetian and get his thoughts. First I'll ask you, Safetian, maybe you can share your thoughts about how you feel Bitcoin is sound money, just as sound of money as gold, or even better, and maybe even talk about how you described in your book, your upcoming book, and let us know what you think. And maybe I'll also after that ask you about what you think about the altcoins taking market share and the market caps and things like that. So let me go ahead and don't forget to unmute yourself, but go ahead and tell us your thoughts on this, Safetian. What do you think?
Well, so lots of things to go through. So first of all, I definitely agree with Andy on the idea of Bitcoin as sound money. And for me, like Andy, my interest in Bitcoin came because I used to be interested in gold. However, as I learned about Bitcoin, I realized there's a little bit of a difference between some of people like me and other kinds of people who are into gold, in that what some people call as gold fetishism, just the idea of people who are just obsessed with gold because it's yellow and shiny, or because it's scarce, or just because of its chemical, because of its superficial qualities almost, or that it has to remain the money. It has to always remain money. And it's not really exactly about that. The reason gold is money is, and the reason that it has won that role over thousands of years in many societies all over the world, goes back to the fact that it has a high stock to flow ratio. This is really the key idea, that the quantity of gold that exists, because gold is not something that can decay, it is a chemical element that is stable and does not decay. It means that we've been accumulating thousands of years of gold stockpiles. Over time, we're just accumulating them. None of them have gone bad. On the other hand, if you look at things like industrial metals or gasoline or all of these other things, they are always being consumed. That means that the new annual production every year for all of these things is quite significant compared to the existing stockpiles. So if anybody were to choose any metal for money, to use it as a medium of saving, to use it as a place where they would put their savings, they would do much better when they pick something that has a high stock to flow ratio, because if its price goes up, the people who produce it won't be able to produce a lot more of it. On the other hand, if you picked copper, it's very easy for copper miners to flood the market because there's a lot of copper in the mines compared to the stockpile that exists. In gold, on the other hand, we've got thousands of years of stockpile. So the new production being very small compared to the large production is the reason that makes gold money. And now we have something that has that as well, which is Bitcoin. I mean, the only thing that comes close to gold in that regard now is Bitcoin. It's still got a higher inflation supply growth rate annually than gold so far, but it will overtake gold or go under gold within a few years. So this really is why, for me, I think Bitcoin is a form of sound money. And I think gold is also sound money. And, throughout history, money is not, it's not a really settled question of, you can say, what money is. Throughout history, technology changes and societies change, and things change, and people find newer solutions to problems, and people are always looking for the best technology to use as gold. And so you go through history, you see people have used seashells, and people have used all sorts of different things, not just gold and silver and metals and so on. So whatever the technology was, you can understand why something served the purpose of gold. And in my book, I talk extensively about how that real issue is always that people pick for gold, for money, the thing that has a low supply growth rate. So that's why rare seashells could make money, and that's why gold makes money, and that's why Bitcoin, I think, makes money. So I think both of them are an example of that. And I definitely, as like Andy, I prefer both over fiat money. And fundamentally because it's not easy for any single individual to control, or individual entity, or even several entities to control the supply of gold and Bitcoin, like with fiat money. The difference between the two, however, is, and this is where gold bugs get angry at me, when essentially Bitcoin is like a computer, a laptop computer, and gold is like an abacus. I mean, if you're thinking of it in terms of its ability to move value around, if you try to move large quantities of gold it's really expensive and it's really risky. And moving gold and accepting gold, you always have a risk of it being mixed in with tungsten or other things, so you need to verify it, and verifying it is very expensive. So if you look at the payment clearance that happens in gold, it takes a lot of time and it costs a lot of money. And the way to get around that is to run through centralized solutions that hold the gold and then just carry out calculations and clearing payments between different parties. So then and that's how we got fiat money in the first place. Bitcoin, on the other hand, even if we assume that it was to never change, even if we assume that we're going to stick to the current specification, which, would not be the worst bet that you could take, because this is what Bitcoin's been doing more or less for the past few years. If we stick to the current specification, it still does almost 400,000 transactions a day, and these takes less than an hour to clear with several confirmations. So therefore, in less than an hour, you can move enormous quantities of value all over the world, and the cost so far is far lower than gold. Even if the price goes up to $10,000, it still remains, the transaction cost goes up to $10,000 per transaction. That's still somewhere in the order of how much it costs to move large quantities of gold. And the importance of this is that gold and Bitcoin are essentially the only two methods of payment in the world today that are not credit money, that are not money with third-party liability, that are not money dependent on a central bank that could inflate its supply or confiscate your holdings from the banks that it controls that hold it. It's money that is just basically valid in the hands of the person who owns it. So yeah, this is an introduction to my thinking on sound money. Now, maybe I'm not as optimistic as Andy in terms of it, having to necessarily happen in the next year. I've been around Bitcoin long enough to, curb my enthusiasm a bit. I think, we could see this process take place over a very long time, and that would be fine. We could just witness a small bleed of money from fiat to Bitcoin from different countries. It's an enormous mountain of fiat money that would need to flush into Bitcoin in order for us to finally get to the nirvana of Bitcoinization. But the total money supply in the world is about $80 trillion. The total supply, the total value of all the Bitcoins in circulation is around 80 billion. So we're still at 1 out of 1,000. And I know these things can accelerate, but we may still have a way to go. But that's not bad. It's just more of a chance for you to accumulate more Bitcoin. So you should be happy about that. On altcoins in general, I'd say I disagree with Andy on this being such an historic market. I think. And this is where basically I get into the most controversial statements that I make in the medium. But essentially, I think all altcoins are scams, and I don't really like to pay attention to them anymore. And none of them matter because none of them do anything that Bitcoin cannot do. The only difference is that they do what Bitcoin does without the one thing that makes Bitcoin important, which is that Bitcoin is outside the control of anybody. It's completely decentralized. There isn't a single point of failure in Bitcoin that you could attack, and there is nobody who could change the supply of Bitcoin. And I think if you look at all the altcoins, the reality is, if you were just interested in using digital cash, if you like the technology of Bitcoin, you just go ahead and use Bitcoin. Bitcoin's fine. If you're a coder, you go ahead and you code with on Bitcoin. So the fact that you want to set up this new digital currency, all these people setting up all these digital currencies, trying to come up with stories about, this one will do this, and this one is going to revolutionize blackjack and poker online, or something or the other, or smart contracts, or healthcare records, or all of these other hundreds of buzzwords that we've heard in the blockchain scam space over the past few years. Essentially the same story over and over again. And the motivation is never to create digital cash. And so there's always a team driving this forward, and there's always a team directing it, and there's always a team that can take control of it and one day change the money supply of it. So for the digital gold case, none of the altcoins could ever do this, in my opinion. And therefore, then you need to start assessing them based on the buzzword cases that they try and sell, which shift every 15 minutes. And there's no way that you could study all the altcoins and all the buzzwords that they put out there. So I've just decided to quit doing it, because frankly, I'm pretty sure none of them is ever going to do anything interesting. I mean, if there was one of them that was going to do anything interesting, it would have already done it. But the reality is, Bitcoin's blockchain technology, this thing that people think is, some sort of a science of doing things, is really just you know, a jury rig of a system that works in a way that allows us to have digital cash and a digital payments and settlement network that isn't controlled by a single person. There's really no reason, outside of desire to scam VCs and governments out of funding, there's really no reason why you would imagine that this would be good for anything else. And you know, if you've been in this space for long enough, you've heard years of all of these stories about it's going to revolutionize this and that and that and that. And for years, I've just been asking people to show me one example of one of these things that does one thing that has been deployed anywhere commercially, and nobody tells me anything. And people will then start sending me all these press release, fake news bullshit about, oh, you know, this coin is going to power Taiwan's new sewage system with blockchain technology or some shit like that. And supposedly this is supposed to be, you know, proof that this thing exists. So yeah, I told myself initially I wasn't going to get into altcoins because I don't like talking about them. But, you know, maybe now I have this rant here on record. I can always refer people to it. And this will be my hopefully final statement. Oh, who am I kidding? It won't be.
Absolutely. Can I respond to this?
Oh, yeah, Ken. Andy, absolutely. And before you respond, though, I'm because I saw you writing stuff down. I know you got stuff to say. So before we get to you, Andy, let me just say a couple things real quick. Safety. And so yeah, I mean, maybe just a couple things that I think about altcoins, and then maybe you guys can discuss that real quick. But first, I just wanted to say, you know, my view on altcoins is that I love the experimentation. I absolutely love what everybody's doing. You know, I call it like a financial global, you know, a global financial revolution that we're having here, where the whole world is now taking part in building the financial future, right? Instead of just, you know, maybe some developers on Wall Street. So I definitely do like that, but I have to agree with you on some of those points, Safety. And I mean, when you're talking about these crazy use case scenarios, I literally just saw an ICO that was for bananas. It was for to like build a banana farm and like ship bananas. I mean, it's we've definitely reached some crazy points there. So so that's what I wanted to say real quick about altcoins. So I definitely think that they're all just an extension of Bitcoin. You know, a lot of them even use Bitcoin source code. So to me, they're just an extension of Bitcoin. But, Safety.
If I could say one thing, the only thing that I'll say, the only legitimate use of altcoins is that they're Bitcoin testnets. And so investment in altcoins should be viewed as a donation to Bitcoin research. I think it was Paul Sports who said that. I can't remember now, but yeah, I agree with you.
Yep, absolutely. And you know, and for really the #1 use case that I've seen people use altcoins for is to get more Bitcoin. So with that said, let's throw it over to Andy and see what you got to say. Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, I don't want to be misinterpreted, because I actually agree with everything Saif said. But here's where I was coming at. Again, you know, when I said that the money is going to rush in, all the altcoins are going to go up, it's not saying that I believe that they're so great. I just said I think they're more like tech stocks than they have anything to do. They're not currencies, they're tech stocks. What's important, though, is the fact that I believe that this is the financing of the future. What, you know, genuine financing of real ideas and companies, some of which, look, there's a lot of altcoins. Some of them may well be doing great things. Who knows? Maybe Monero is great. Maybe it's subsumed by Bitcoin. Maybe it's a big failure. Who knows? But there's a lot of things out there that are going to be tested. And more importantly, you know, you just saw that ruling in Delaware. You're going to be able to sell stock with blockchains. Just like Bitcoin gets you around banks, you know, this technology is going to be able to get us around like investment banks, like Goldman Sachs. We don't need them anymore. And so I think the financing of the future is going to be in this medium, even though I'm not saying anything about these particular ones that are out there now. But more importantly, the reason I think they're going to all go up, and I don't mean all, but many, and many are going to go up by many multiples of Bitcoin, and some will be big failures, is because people just cannot comprehend how much fiat currency has been produced and driven into these legacy assets that are dying. I mean, like I'm saying, stocks and bonds as an asset class are going to die in the next few decades. Forget the fact that they're overvalued, or that the economy is dying, or that there's going to be hyperinflation in certain places, starting with Venezuela and moving on. The fact is, people are going to be leaving this system en masse, and all of that printed money has got to go somewhere. And I think that this is the most revolutionary technology of all time, of which, you know, you can, you know, use that Bitcoin dominance number, 50%. If you're going to say that half of all this flood of money, of currencies from around the world that comes into space, and half of it goes into Bitcoin, That's an astronomical amount of money. And if the other half goes into 10,000 other ones, that's an astronomical amount of appreciation too. Some of them are complete scams. Some of them are useful. And in a lot of cases, and I said from the beginning when Bcash came out, I said Bcash is going to do great. It doesn't matter if it threatens Bitcoin. It doesn't matter if it actually does anything, which as we're seeing, it does absolutely nothing except enrich miners. But it doesn't even matter because there's so much fiat currency out there that Bcash can go up and it won't have any impact on Bitcoin or anything else. There's just that much money that's going to be leaving the legacy system and going into this sector. And that's why there's so few out there. I mean, when you look at we call them the top tier altcoins, right? I mean, Ripple isn't even I don't even know what you'd call it. So take that out and you just got Ethereum and then really nothing else of size. So people are desperate to have this like Bcash because it at least has, for now, some kind of market cap and liquidity to trade. And then people are, they're moving down. Okay, well, let's go to Litecoin and Ethereum Classic, and Monero and Dash, and then they're going to start going even lower because as this craze, from an investment standpoint, it's going to be a craze, but from a monetary standpoint, it's going to be institutions and sovereign governments and billionaires and the thousands of millionaires that are going to be trying to leave the system and protect themselves. And let's say Bitcoin dominance, half of it's going to go into Bitcoin, the other half is going to go everywhere else, whether they're good investments or not. And I bet you most of them will be, like we saw in the dot-com era. Of course, there's going to be an end game. Eventually, these investments will have to prove that they are something. And I think pretty much anyone watching this realizes Bitcoin has the least to prove in the space. So it's most likely that money is going to stay there and multiply. So I truly believe that the amount of capital that's going to come into the sector is going to be unprecedented in history.
Yeah, but I mean, I think if that money keeps going into alts, what's happening now is that we're getting inflation in altcoins because there's nothing to differentiate all of these things from one another. They can all get a ticker. All they need is a ticker and a white paper, basically, and then they're trading and people are buying and selling, and that can go on for a while. But you know how business cycles work. If you're a gold buck, you're definitely familiar with that. As soon as credit creation slows down in the market economy, things begin to collapse and people rush towards liquidity. And when that happens with the dollars, a lot of people who have altcoin and Bitcoin holdings are going to liquidate them. And I think in this sort of scenario, the assets that will win in the long run are going to be the ones that you can rely on to be reliably scarce. And so, the dollar might even benefit from this, like what happened in 2008, 2009, as people need to hold cash. But you can also see Bitcoin and gold benefiting. But you can see that altcoins in that sort of situation, their charts are going to start looking terrible. And then when their charts start looking terrible, everybody wants to dump. And then there's no bottom to how low these things can go, because fundamentally, why would anybody hold them? I mean, nobody is buying Ether to run a smart contract. Let's be clear about this. There's not been one Ether spent on like an actual smart contract for anything, other than just raising funding.
That's right. That's exactly right. Ethereum is big and liquid, and that's why people like it. And Bcash is also. And the big question, the $1 million question, or the 21 million Bitcoin question is, when all this money floods into this sector, is it going to be in addition to what happens in the legacy sector, or is it going to subtract from it? Meaning, is there going to be a rush out of legacy assets into cryptocurrency that causes this major deflation and loss of confidence, or is it just going to be more inflation that causes inflation around the world to increase, and then the central banks are in really big trouble because interest rate pressures will start to rise. And of course, if you have deflation, if people actually get scared of stocks and bonds being overvalued and they're rushing into Bitcoin, then the central banks will come in and double and triple and quadruple their QE and negative interest rates, et cetera. So the point is that, I mean, from the way I see it, the tsunami of change in the financial markets that's going to be caused by Bitcoin, and again, the money, because Saif was just saying, it may take some time to change. And of course, everything takes time. But as we know, in this space and in this modern world, things move a lot faster. And I truly believe that the amount of money that rushes into the sector is going to cause such a dramatic amount of attention to focus on it, that it's going to, in and of itself, like a self-fulfilling prophecy, drive change. It's going to make people think about what is going on in this crypto space. Are people actually leaving the legacy sector, or is it something different? Is it just pure speculation? But the point is, I believe that the amount of attention to this space is going, I mean, you know, we think now that, oh, we got the World Crypto Network's doing shows every day, and you know, and there's a couple of smart people on Twitter, but there's really not much attention. You got the coin desks, and anytime you do have a mainstream publication, they're usually either just denigrating Bitcoin or talking about what its price is as opposed to what the impact is. You know, I mean, we just had, I was on the show with Adam the other day, and you had Gabriel from Venezuela talking about how it's saving lives. Well, it's going to save a lot more lives. I mean, you see today in Vietnam, they're talking about accepting it. In Japan, they're now accepting it. In a lot of other countries, they're going to accept it out of necessity. And I think the conversation is going to be heightened simply because so much capital is racing into it that it's going to cause everyone to focus on it, and focus on it in a real way, other than just say, well, look at the price.
Safety, do you have any responses to that? Oh, you're muted, right?
Sorry, I mean, you know, we should be a little bit careful, because let's be honest here. Gold bugs have been saying the same thing for quite a while, and you know, the dollar.
I don't like that term. Gold bug means, like you said, someone who has a fetish about gold. I couldn't care less about gold in any way other than that it's undervalued, and that I believe
but I mean, you know,
monetary system that's dying, that's a great asset to hold, because it's going to go up a lot, especially when the gold cartel holding it down eventually breaks, and they will.
But I mean, fundamentally, if Bitcoin needs another 30 years to get to the point where it is a global currency, I think it would be fantastic. And there's nothing wrong with that. So there's really, you know, it might take long, and there are a lot of things that could come up. You know, when you talk about attention, there's a reason the media is always trying to find negative stories about Bitcoin, and people are always giving these aspects about it. So these negative stories aren't just going to go away. And, you know, when people hear about price rises, people hear about price drops, it's not a lot of people who will look at charts and see exactly how well it has been performing and how much it's going to go up and so on. And they think it's just a speculative bubble. So it might take a while for people to really understand it. Plus, of course, you know, you got to remember that it will take a while for people to become technically competent enough to use it. That's no joke. You know, it's not, you know, you decide, okay, I want to put a few $100s in Bitcoin, but then, you know, all right, how do I store them safely? How do I not end up putting them in someone's scam and losing them, which is what has happened to a lot of people. So, you know, I wouldn't mind if you were right. Obviously, it would be great if we just got the whole thing over tomorrow. But I'd like to be pleasantly surprised rather than disappointed.
I agree with you. I'm not saying that it's going to be a global monetary currency in a year or two. That could take 30 years. But what I do believe is going to happen in a much shorter period of time is that people are going to realize that it is an actual safe haven currency, or a safe haven asset. You can call it whatever you want, like gold. I believe that because, look, this is what I've spent the last 15 years talking about. People know me from around the world, not just talking about because I love gold, but because talking about the fiat currency system and how it's dying. I mean, look at all the currencies that are crashing. Look at all the debts that's exploding, all the political, you know, like Trump getting elected and the Brexit. I mean, it's only going to get worse because this system is really on its last legs. And as a result, I think the money that's racing in is going to prompt more and more people to think, hey, you know what? Maybe Bitcoin is a safe haven asset, and maybe cryptocurrency is a new real asset class that's going to, in some ways, replace what we have now. That, I think, that conversation, particularly if we have any kind of crisis, if the powers that be lose any kind of control in any way, which at some point they have to do, that could be dramatic. But as for being, you know, used as a global currency, that could take a long time. But you know, that's not why people on this channel are listening. For the most part, we would just like to protect our wealth and, you know, maybe make some wealth.
Yeah, so let me just say one thing real quick. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, I agree with both you guys pretty much, where, look, $1 trillion could pour into this marketplace, right, into the crypto world, and it would still be pretty tiny, right? It'd still be pretty tiny compared to things like gold and the other the other assets of the world, like even oil and all these other things. So even if $1 trillion poured in here, we still Bitcoin would be huge, but we still wouldn't be the global currency yet. So I definitely think it's going to take decades. And I think you guys both agreed that, it's going to take decades, of course, for this, what we call infrastructure inversion shift, right? That Andreas Antonopoulos coined, where we completely switch from the old system to the new system. But it is going to happen in phases. And in these phases, we're going to see these huge run-ups. We're going to see huge liquidity, like Andy says, being poured into these markets. 100 billion here, 100 billion here, until we finally hit $1 trillion. And then that's just still the jumping off point, to where that starts spinning other wheels, right? So you spin one wheel, that spins another, and spins another, and on and on and on.
That's Edward's number. Edward's number, he says, it's $350 trillion if you add together, the legacy assets, like, they're dominated by bonds and stocks and a few other things. There's no doubt. You pick 1%. If 1% of that money comes in, that's $3.5 trillion. Where's it going to go? Into the 16 million Bitcoins that are out there, and a couple of Ethereums and 7 million Dashes. That's what I'm talking about, especially the ones that have caps. And even the ones that don't have caps, it's not like they're going to be infinitely printed. They will go up, at modest rates, and most of them. The point is, there's just not going to be space for them all. And it's just the fact. There's nothing to do with whether these things are good or not. But the fact is, the long term, 30 years, absolutely, we may have a global thing. And 30 years from now, we may not have stock and bond markets anymore. We'll have ICO markets, and there'll be no Goldman Sachs anymore, because you don't need them anymore. Just like you won't need Visa or MasterCard or your neighborhood branch bank to handle your transactions.
I slightly disagree on. I think I certainly hope the future will have stock markets, because I think stock markets are some of the greatest inventions of the modern world. The idea of a stock company that separates ownership from management has proved to be extremely successful all over the world. And the idea, fundamentally, the key point is the idea of a free market in capital, where anybody can invest in capital. You don't have to get your hands dirty and go and start your own business. You can focus on working on something and then put your capital by buying and in things that other people are managing. I think it has proved to be an enormously powerful engine for mobilizing capital, increasing production, and economic advancement. So I think there will always be business, there will always be production, and there will always be people who want to own shares in production. And stocks are a good institution. Obviously, in today's monetary mess, we have all sorts of problems with the stock market and the bubbles that are caused by the fact that we have unsound money. But that does not negate the invention of stocks itself. So I think, in the future we'll have stocks, and we can have them in a world that is fully based on Bitcoin. But frankly, I don't think that this ICO mania has much legs beyond just, the hype of getting people to put their money in something that's shiny and new. But really, the notion that you want some form of trustlessness in an investment is completely ridiculous, and it's going to begin to dawn on people now. If you're investing with somebody, it's very different from just sending a payment. You send a payment, that's it. You want to be done with it, and you don't want to be traced possibly, and you don't want anybody to know that you may have sent it. But if you're investing in somebody, the transaction, the transaction where you send the money from you to them is just one tiny little sliver of the entire process. You need to do your due diligence. You need to understand what's going on. You need to kick the tires of the company and figure out what is really going on. And compared to all of the work that needs to go into making an investment decision, the few dollars that you pay in order to send the transfer wire today is completely inconsequential. So ICOs are, saying that we're revolutionizing the investment process. No, they're just revolutionizing the bank transfer wire. Instead of sending a bank transfer wire from your bank, you're sending it from an ICO. But in fact, because they're making it trustless, it's ideal. It's just an ideal ecosystem for anybody who wants to build something that is just a scam. I mean, fundamentally, nobody had a problem raising money who had a good idea and whose problem is now being solved by ICOs. I mean, if you had a good business idea, you could have gotten funding through many different ways. And let's, for as much as people who are libertarians like to moan about government, government is not out there banning people from investing. You can get people to just invest very easily through many kinds of different forms and many kinds of different arrangements. And so The impediments to people getting investments were really that they had bad business ideas, or it was not the fact that, you know, sending the transfer wire, the wire payment was too expensive. So all that ICOs are doing is that they're allowing investors to take money that they're completely unaccountable for, because it's all just done very quickly. So I don't really see much of a future for it. I think people will be investing, and I think payments can be done with digital currencies, but the idea that, you know, we're going to fundamentally transform things. No, I think there will still be venture capital, there will still be angel investors, there will still be a highly complex structure of production with people at different stages of it. Yes.
Well, look, nothing is absolute. I'm not saying there'll never be stocks. And again, my whole career has been in stocks. I was a sell-side analyst at Solomon for 7 years. I was a buy-side analyst at hedge funds. My whole life has been the stock market. And of course, nothing's absolute. Bitcoin won't take over the world. There will be other currencies. There will be, and ICOs won't take over the world. There'll be all different kinds of financings. But the fact is, you know, if we're talking about ICOs or an abuse, stocks and bonds, you know, were created with good intentions, as was fiat currency. But it has been so horribly abused by Wall Street, by the governments, which now buy the stocks and finance them and allow the accounting fraud that enables the stocks of companies that shouldn't be around, to the point where, and look at bonds, the governments literally buy up all the bonds in the world. So there's no due diligence that's involved anymore. There's no price discovery that's involved anymore. And look what happens. You look up and you have a world drowning in hundreds of trillions of dollars of debt. You have companies that aren't even productive anymore, because most of the companies are disincentivized to try to get their stock up by borrowing money at government suppressed interest rates, and et cetera, et cetera. The point is, just like ICOs can be bastardized and abused, nothing has been more bastardized and abused than the legacy system, starting from the unsound money that we're talking about here, that underlies it, that enables it to be hyperinflated and monetized and manipulated. And then, of course, all that goes along with it, all the fraud on all levels. So stocks and bonds are no longer modern day financing vehicles. Now, ICOs, it's a brand new thing. I'm just simply saying the future is decentralization. Whether you're talking about this, how you store value, which is why gold is so great. I mean, yes, it has all the issues that Safe's talking about, but it certainly has monetary value. And now Bitcoin has the potential to be the greatest safe haven store of value, because it's completely decentralized and it actually has some utility for transactions. And of course, you don't have to transport it, all those kind of things. So, you know, but generally speaking, it's all about decentralization. That's what's so great about the ICO concept. In time, it will go away from the Wild West. There'll be rules, there'll be etiquette, there'll be an understanding, there'll be a better knowledge of the players and how things work, so that there's less scams. But essentially, you know, stocks and bonds, this has already happened. It's been destroyed by governments and financiers and bad actors. And I think in time, I really believe that the whole world, you know, I wrote an article a few months ago called "The Future of Value is Decentralization." And whether you're talking about how people transfer money, how people raise money, or how people store money, that is what the future is. And that's why it's so incredible when you think that there's hundreds of trillions of fiat currency sitting in these horribly overvalued, manipulated assets that are, you know, we have a world of the 99% and the 1% because of these flawed and manipulated vehicles. And that's why it's so great that cryptocurrency came along, the greatest gift to the 99% in history, because the money is going to flow there, and then you're going to see the innovation flow, and then the ICOs will not be like they are right now. They'll become a way of simply having real financing with without the middleman that abuse it.
Can I get to be David Downer again, or have I done that too much?
Go for it.
Yeah, I might as well. Frankly, I'm not too big on the whole decentralization is going to change everything buzzword fountain that we've been experiencing over the last few years in the Bitcoin space. I think decentralization is a tool, it's a means, it's not an end. The point of decentralization is that you would want to make something. I think one way of doing it is that it's reliable, it's immutable. It's not the way to make things fastest. It's not the most efficient way. So, you know, when you're going to have a network like Bitcoin, where every member of the network wants to record every transaction everybody else does, there is no way that that is going to be faster than a solution where it's centralized, where not everybody has to run software and bandwidth that has to record all the transactions. I don't want to record all the transactions that everybody makes on my computer. And so, the decentralization, I think the places where it has worked has been in just essentially issues of reliability rather than efficiency and performance. And so it works particularly in the case of Bitcoin, because the only thing Bitcoin needs is just the reliability of knowing that it is always going to be there. I don't believe that decentralization has anything to add to contracts or smart contracts. You're going to have a contract in the real world. It's going to be related to actual physical things in the real world, and your blockchain is completely powerless over those things. There's no way that your blockchain can move my car to you if you don't pay, or if I don't pay, or whatever. There's no sovereignty there. So really adding decentralization is just, it's buzzword fetish that people have been engaging in over the past few months. But really fundamentally, the only reason it works in the case of Bitcoin, and the only reason it's important in the case of Bitcoin, is because the money market, the market for money, it's an $80 trillion money. And if you can produce a credible competitor in that market, and you just manage to, scratch the surface of that market, you end up with $80 billion. But that's, you have a limited capacity for on-chain transactions, and you have all these performance issues. So if unless you're trying to build something that will resist government control, that will not be easy to shut down, there's really no reason for this. And there's not much of all these use cases where you need the trustlessness. You don't need trustlessness when you invest. You want there to be trust. You're giving people your money, and they're telling you they're going to use it for a business. And you need to be able to see where the business is, what it does, and you want them to be accountable so that if they mess up, they're held reliable. There's no point in having something decentralized and trustless there. And so I think,
well, is Goldman Sachs, would you consider them trusted? Because that's what I'm just talking about, because I'm not talking about everything here, but we're talking about centralization in general. Of course, it's good for some things, but in financing, when you're talking about trust, you are talking about trust in Goldman Sachs. That's essentially what it is.
Yeah,
Goldman
but the reason
Sachs
that you have to trust them is
equation
because of the unsound money.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, the reason that you have to trust them is because essentially they have a government-protected monopoly. The government allows them to borrow at interest rates that are much lower than what you and I can borrow.
If Bitcoin starts to usurp fiat currency, then they will not have a government-created monopoly. Look, there's going to be bumps along the way. It's going to take a long time, and it will be a war. It's not going to be easy, but it's going to happen. Goldman Sachs will not run the world for the next century.
Sorry, Safety. Let me step in real quick 1 sec. So I just want to do, and I want to hear your feedback on this too, Safety. And so let me just say this: it is absolutely early days still, right? You guys can both agree on that. It is absolutely early days. So trying to predict things like saying like there will or will not be a stock market in 30 years. Look, we have things that we are just coming up with, just barely coming up with things like DAOs, right? Decentralized exchanges, this type of second layer solutions. So Safety, when you say like, look, blockchain is not for efficiency, we know that, right? We understand that, but there will be layers above that. So what do you think about, second layer solutions and side chains and Lightning and that kind of stuff, being able to provide the decentralized security that Andy is talking about with the speed and efficiency of the centralized systems? What do you think about that, Safety? You're still muted. Sorry, you're still muted.
Oh, sorry. The future of Bitcoin scaling is going to definitely be through solutions like that. And you see, when you think about it, those solutions involve some element of centralization. There will be payment channels that you will be able to maintain. It would be completely unworkable if everybody had to record every transaction that everybody else makes. But that's perfectly fine. And that's why for me, and this is a key point that I keep making in my book, which is that, the importance of Bitcoin is not in fast transactions, it's not in microtransactions, it's not in low transaction fees. The importance is that the supply cannot be controlled by anybody. So we run this very kludgy system in order to do this. But this is such a valuable thing that we could potentially witness this grow to a world in which a Bitcoin is worth $1 million or maybe $10 million, and the transaction fee is $1,000 or $10,000, because this is essentially replicating what gold does at a very expensive, very difficult to manage sort of way, which can be easily co-opted by governments. Bitcoin does it with much more difficulty for governments to co-opt it. That's really what's important. So, this is why I think it's not necessarily going to be, decentralization is not going to be a magic pill. It's only a magic pill in this situation because we need something that wouldn't be killed. You know, somebody built e-gold a few years ago, and that was a good sort of payment system that used gold, but it was shut down effectively by the US government because they're not just going to allow competition, but essentially they can't shut down Bitcoin, and that's what really matters about it. And you know, I think with time, and I hope this is really the mission that is guiding my writing of the book. I hope people will just try and focus on the most important aspect of this, which is that it is sound money. Sound money is something so much more important than all the little efficiencies that people talk about in all those blockchain use cases. You know, whatever it is, healthcare records is not anywhere near as important as sound money. If you don't have sound money, it becomes impossible to have healthcare as an industry. It becomes impossible to have the specialization of labor that allows you to have complex healthcare. That's what really matters. And I think, you know, I think Bitcoin is doing great, but perhaps it could be doing greater if people would focus on that and just let all of the buzzword merchants deliver products first before we just start, you know, how do I put this politely, fawning over rather than fawning over their words. That's really what it is. We need to understand this. It's not about, you know, smart contracts or changing this and this and that. We have a way of building the best technology for money that has ever been invented. It makes golden seashells and all these things look so slow and unadvanced compared to it. And that's going to be an enormously significant thing, I think, in human development over the next century, maybe. So this is what we really should be focusing on. And yet, you know, every discussion ends up about, you know, all these other use cases and all these other altcoins and all these, yeah.
Well, I'll just finish the segment by saying I agree completely. The whole point of this conversation, that's what's so great about the show. We agree 100%. The root cause of pretty much all of the financial evils that are going on and the wealth disparity in the world is unsound money. So all the things that I'm talking about here are all based on the adoption of Bitcoin as a sound money, and will make people realize that fiat currency has been the destroyer of value. And this is something that could be something that builds value. And I really think that that's what's going to happen fast. All these other things that I'm talking about, of course, they're going to take time. These are sea changes in the world, but it all starts with the money. And that's why I'm so hopeful and excited about what Bitcoin has done already and what it's going to do just in the next 2 or 3 years.
Yep, absolutely. So really great points, guys. Really great discussion. We're trying to save time. Maybe we can only just do one more topic. So just wanted to thank everybody for viewing us so far. We have 1,000 live viewers here. The chat is going. Great discussion. If you guys could just give us a thumbs up and maybe subscribe to the World Crypto Network channel, that would be great. New people can subscribe. And then, of course, if you guys have already been here, please just give us a thumbs up. That will allow us to get into more people's feeds. So let's move on to the second topic, which is, let's do Bcash a little bit. Maybe you guys can, you know, from an economic perspective, discuss how Bcash is maybe affecting Bitcoin, because there has been some of this mining swings that have been pushing miners back and forth to Bitcoin, to Bcash, and maybe you can comment on what you think about the miners doing this. Like, is this right? Is this inevitable? Is this going to die down at some point? So we'll go first with Andy on your thoughts on Bcash so far.
Yes, and again, I didn't have much time to worry about Bcash because it just came out of nowhere. It was all about the 2x fork, and then this magical thing just came out of nowhere, and voila, we got free money. That's great. But again, you know, it's like from a technical perspective, I obviously don't understand. But look, I listen every day to the smart people. I listen to the World Crypto Network, to Jimmy and Tone, and I understand enough of what's going on. Look, Bcash is a scam. I'm not even sure exactly why it came around. If it was just a bunch of guys who are like I was saying, there's so much demand for cryptos. We can just spin this one off and call it Bitcoin something and people will buy it. And then they got these, it looks like they got these really weird rules. Like if they can't mine enough blocks, they have emergency difficulty adjustments so that they can mine it all, except the problem is it's all just a handful of people mining it. So they're basically just enriching themselves. And I would say it's like a zero-sum game, but it's really not. It's just money is just flying into this space. Maybe some of it's leaving Bitcoin, but probably very little. It's mostly just new money coming in, you know, Koreans getting all excited because BitThumb put it on. So I think it's just a plaything really for the miners. It has absolutely no economic value other than the fact that it's liquid and it's investable in the crypto space and has a B in its name that, representing Bitcoin somehow. But the thing with these things is they work until they don't work. I mean, it's not like you can infinitely do this and have like a million, as Adam calls them, crypto dividends, because yeah, maybe the 2x one will have the same impact for a little. But of course, again, if they still have replay protection, people like me wouldn't even dare to try to split our coins. So that one might fizzle just because no one's even paying attention to it. But let's say they get replay protection. All right, maybe it does the same kind of thing, maybe a little less, maybe a little more. People get their free money. And at some point, people will be like, because I've heard there's going to be more of them now. And it's like, all right, at some point, people realize that just fabricating complete nothingness out of thin air. And it's only made Bitcoin stronger because, I mean, I was listening today to Tone, and he's talking about how they're mining like one block every like several hours, because obviously there's absolutely no one doing anything on it other than speculating. So I think Bcash was the best possible thing that could have happened for Bitcoin. And frankly, it's the kind of thing we're heading now into this 2x fork a few months from now, which at this point, you wonder, why would anyone even do it? I mean, you already have your big blocks. Most of the players who signed the agreement probably just wanted Segwit. Most of the players probably have no idea even what the difference between Bitcoin Cash and 2x is. So, and plus, they've now been neutered by the fact that Bcash front ran it. So, frankly, I think that once we get through November and because Tone's properly trying to prepare us for a correction, which may just happen because you have to have a correction at some point. But I think once we get through November and people realize that 2x either doesn't happen or it does happen, it has the same kind of absolutely zero impact on Bitcoin, then that's when the real money is going to rush in. And that's why I think 2018 is going to be scary, crazy in the crypto space, because Bitcoin's immutability and sound money aspects will be known to the entire world.
Absolutely. I really think that after November, I mean, it was already proven, like you said, after the Bcash fork, what the real BTC is, and that there'll only ever be 21 million BTC, right? So I think that as the world figures this out more and more, it will make Bitcoin more stable. And like you said, the 2x fork is coming, but everybody's already understood now. And then for certain after the 2x fork, I mean, come on, we will the market will definitely understand that there's only one BTC, and we can really just go to the moon into the 5-digit Bitcoin price that you were talking about next year, Andy. So Safety, go ahead and let's hear your thoughts on Bcash so far and this craziness and anything that Andy has said. You're muted, sorry.
I agree entirely with what you guys are saying on this. I think the good thing about all of these forks is that they're just going to show that all of this idea, all of this media hysteria that we've had over the years of people or power struggles within Bitcoin and all these people that are, big blocks versus small blocks, fundamentally it's becoming clear to people that, there are no power struggles in Bitcoin. There's the Bitcoin implementation that is backwards compatible, that can work with the current nodes as they are today. And as long as you keep running your node to work with the nodes of the people who are holding and running nodes today, then you're going to remain on that network. And if you try and make a change that will be incompatible with this, you will just end up with your own shitcoin. And this became clear with the Bcash story. We've had it with 700, 1,000, I don't know how many of them are there already, but all these other altcoins, they're no different. Essentially, there's always going to be Bitcoin and then there's all these others. And I think, hopefully we're going to see some incident very soon where Bcash is going to need some sort of hard fork or some sort of coding intervention. And essentially, since the whole thing is just like it's all smoke and mirrors of a blockchain, it could be very easy for the people behind it to switch it around. And I think that will drive the point home quite clearly. The sort of November hard fork, if it does ever happen, is going to be stillborn and it's pathetic. One thing I think about, I think I try and not get too involved in the drama around these things because, you just know that at the end of the day, they're all just going to blow off and it will be inconsequential. I mean, it won't be inconsequential. It'll be consequential to the extent that once people realize this is how it's going to end, it'll improve people's perception of what Bitcoin is. But I think we can think of these Bitcoin forks possibly as essentially a startup exit plan. So if you have a Bitcoin startup, your Bitcoin startup is not doing well, or if there's a reason that you expect your profitability to not work out. So some of the miners in China, or some of the startups behind the New York agreement, it's no big secret that they've not been doing greatly. And if you think about it, getting behind one of these forks and saying that we are going to support this because this is the real Satoshi's vision or whatever, allows them to, they can prop up a fork. If you can get all of these visible Bitcoin names, whether here or in China, to go around saying Bitcoin is upgrading, come on in, come to the new Bitcoin with bigger capacity and so on, they'll sucker in a few people who are going to throw in some money, and that'll pop up the price, allow them to dump their currencies. And essentially you could, well, then the startup will have a big problem on its hand because it's using a shitcoin rather than Bitcoin. But, the startup had a lot of problems on its hand initially anyway. So then they will just be able to blame their failure as a startup on the fact that, something happened to the Bitcoin fork. The Bitcoin fork didn't work because the community is toxic, and because Core is toxic, and it's all Greg Maxwell's fault, and Tamos on Reddit, they ruined everything again, and now our startup failed. But they would have made some good money by propping up a shitcoin and selling it. So you can never be too cynical in life. So I try sometimes to think of those things. I don't have any sources on this, but I can make guesses.
My last comment on this is that even at this point already, it almost feels like Bcash has to be propped up right now, because it becomes so clear as soon as these emergency adjustments go away and everyone realizes that no one's mining it. Then people like Gian have to start to think, well, we actually have to spend our hash power over there to keep it going. And look what we're doing. Look at Bitcoin. The Bitcoin price compared to Bcash is getting higher and higher. So some decisions are going to have to be made, because there's going to be a lot of money flowing into this just because it's blindly flowing into the sector. But I think it's already starting to become clear that Bcash actually has so little value that it's going to have to be propped up by the bad actors, or else it's going to have to be like a Ponzi scheme. You're going to have to pawn it off to just speculators. But the problem is speculators can't mine it. So I almost think that already Bcash is starting to be slowly but surely viewed as a fork disaster. And that's why the 2X one, these guys have got to be thinking, what are we, crazy? Why don't we just, cancel it, watch the price of Bitcoin double, and not deal with an even bigger disaster that's going to be? Because I truly believe that if they go through with it, it will once and for all neuter any forks of the Bitcoin chain for any time in the foreseeable future.
Yep, and that's what I think. I mean, if it doesn't completely destroy the business model of creating a forking Bitcoin, it's going to definitely hurt it. Because people are like, oh, it's free cash, but look, you have to have a huge marketing team, you have to have mining behind it, you have to have a lot of different things, and there's only so many times you can do that. There's only so many times you can get a group of people around an idea to be able to do
fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, that kind of thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I do want to just make a final comment and just remind everybody again that, look, this is early days. We're not saying that Bitcoin is going to take over the world tomorrow. I mean, this is an uphill battle. We all understand that this is an uphill battle. We are literally trying to disrupt the most powerful people in the world. So we're going to have a lot more threats after this 2X thing, but we really believe that this 2X thing is like the last hard fork thing that we have to worry about. They're going to have to come up, like Andy says, with something other than a hard fork threat in order to scare people out of their Bitcoin. So really great discussion, guys. Thanks so much for joining us. We had over 1,000 live viewers. We have tons of people in the chat. We had donations. So thank you guys so much for that. We're going to end this by just doing an outro with everybody and asking them where we can follow them. So Andy, do you have any follow-up topics or follow-up things you want to say or things you want to announce? Please let us know now.
Yeah, well, I'll just end it by saying, yes, I just left Miles Franklin Precious Metals after 6 years. Great people. I still love gold, but I needed to move on. And I'm going to be announcing my new plans in the coming weeks, certainly during September. It'll be very exciting, and you're going to hear a lot more from me in the cryptocurrency space. And again, I just cannot thank enough the World Crypto Network and a handful of others around the world for all the great things they've done to educate, which I'm going to be joining that effort as well.
Awesome, Andy. We're super glad to have you, man. We're super happy to have you. You have great and intelligent things to say. I've definitely enjoyed all of your discussion so far. And again, you guys got to check out the YouTube video with him and Renegade Investor. I have the link in the show notes. It's just absolutely fantastic, describing the 10,000-foot view of what Bitcoin could really become, and just absolutely great. If you guys have any Bitcoin naysayers, send them that video, and then see what they have to say after that, people. Okay, so very awesome stuff. Safety, thanks so much, man, for joining us. We had some technical difficulties in there, but we finally got you, and we're super happy to have your discussion. I enjoyed the back and forth between you guys a lot. That was great. Really good discussion. So Safety, please tell us, where can we find more about you and your work?
Well, I'm most active these days on Twitter. You can also go, which is my handle is @Saifuddin, and you can also go to my website saifuddin.com. I run a mailing list where you can sign up, and I send out my articles only once a month. The important news, though, is that my book on Bitcoin is coming out from Wiley in December. So keep an eye out on that one. December or January at the latest, it should be in a local bookshelf on your internet browser, and you could be ordering it. It's on Bitcoin is sound money, as I mentioned earlier. I'm almost done with writing it, and now I'm finishing it up. So keep your eye out for that one.
Awesome, man. And will you be telling people how to cook meat in that book as well?
That's the next book, actually. That is the next book after that. How to live as a carnivore.
Awesome, everybody. So, okay, buy Bitcoin, live as a carnivore, and you will be happy. This is Safety and advice, and it's hard to disagree with that, man. So, guys, thanks again so much for joining us. We're going to be back again next week. We are doing the show every single week. We got Tone Vase now coming up, about to do his show on his channel, and of course, please catch Tone Vase and Thomas Hunt and Jimmy Song, every single day on the World Crypto Network on Today in Bitcoin. Yeah, Today in Bitcoin. And of course, they just did This Week in Bitcoin, the Bitcoin group. So much great content on the World Crypto Network, guys. We have a lot of stuff coming up for you. Just more announcements, more shows, more helping videos. We really want to just keep going and accelerate. And just thank you guys so much for joining us, for being in the chat, for commenting. We love you guys all. So thanks again. And until next time, guys, keep talking Bitcoin. We'll see you later.
Take care, man. Bye-bye.